Chapter 2. Clay's attention was attracted by the tinkle of an ice cream truck. It was parked across from the Four Seasons Hotel, which was even grander than the Copley Square, and next to the Boston Common, which ran along Boylston for 2 or 3 blocks on this side of the street. The words Mr. Softy were printed in rainbow colors over a pair of dancing ice cream cones. 3 kids were clustered around the window, book bags at their feet, waiting to receive goodies. Behind them stood a woman in a pantsuit with a poodle on a leash, and a couple of teenage girls in low-rider jeans with iPods and earphones that were currently slung around their necks, so they could murmur together, earnestly, no giggles. Clay stood behind them, turning what had been a little group into a short line. He had bought his estranged wife a present. He would stop at Comics Supreme on the way home, and buy his son the new issue of Spider-Man. He might as well treat himself as well. He was bursting to tell Sharon his news, but she'd be out of reach until she got home, 3:45 or so. He thought he would hang around the inn at least until he talked to her, mostly pacing the confines of his small room and looking at his latched-up portfolio. In the meantime, Mr. Softy made an acceptable diversion. The guy in the truck served the 3 kids at the window 2 dilly bars and a monster chocolate and vanilla swirl soft serve cone for the big spender in the middle, who was apparently paying for all of them, while he fumbled a rat's nest of dollar bills from the pocket of his fashionably baggy jeans. The woman with the poodle and the power suit dipped into her shoulder bag, came out with her cell phone. Women in power suits would no more leave their home without their cell phones and without their Amex cards, and flipped it open. Behind them in the park, a dog barked and someone shouted. It did not sound to Clay like a happy shout, but when he looked over his shoulder, all he could see were a few strollers, a dog trotting with a frisbee in its mouth. Weren't they supposed to be on leashes in there, he wondered? Acres of sunny green and inviting shade. It looked like a good place for a man who had just sold his first graphic novel and its sequel, both for an amazing amount of money, to sit and eat a chocolate ice cream cone. When he looked back, the 3 kids in the baggies were gone, and the woman in the power suit was ordering a sundae. One of the 2 girls behind her had a peppermint-colored phone clipped to her hip, and the woman in the power suit had hers screwed into her ear. Clay thought, as he almost always did on one level of his mind or another, when he saw a variation of his behavior, that he was watching an act which once would have been considered almost insufferably rude. Yes, even while engaging in a small bit of commerce with a total stranger, becoming a part of accepted everyday behavior. Put it in dark wander, sweetheart, Sharon said. The version of her he kept in his mind spoke often and was bound to have her say. This was true of the real world, Sharon, as well, separation or no separation. Although not on his cell phone. Clay didn't own one. The peppermint-colored phone played the opening notes of that crazy frog tune that Johnny loved. Was it called Axel F? Clay couldn't remember, perhaps because he had blocked it out. The girl to whom the phone belonged snatched it off her hip and said, "Beth?" She listened, smiled, and said to her companion, "It's Beth." Now the other girl bent forward, and they both listened, nearly identical pixie haircuts. To Clay, they looked almost like Saturday morning cartoon characters, the Powerpuff Girls maybe, blowing together in the afternoon breeze. "Maddie?" said the woman in the power suit at almost exactly the same time. Her poodle was now sitting contemplatively at the end of its leash. The leash was red and dusted with glittery stuff, looking at the traffic on Boylston Street. Across the way at the Four Seasons, a doorman in a brown uniform, they always seemed to be brown or blue, was waving, probably for a taxi. A duck boat crammed with tourists sailed by, looking high and out of place on dry land, the driver bawling into his loudhailer about something historic. The 2 girls listening to the peppermint-colored phone looked at each other and smiled at something they were hearing, but still did not giggle. "Maddie, can you hear me? Can you—" The woman in the power suit raised the hand holding the leash and plugged a long-nailed finger into her free ear. Clay winced, fearing for her eardrum. He imagined drawing her, the dog on the leash, the power suit, the fashionably short hair, and one small trickle of blood from around the finger in her ear. The duck boat just exiting the frame, and the doorman in the background, those things somehow lending the sketch its verisimilitude. They would, it was just a thing you knew. Maddie, you're breaking up. I just wanted to tell you I got my hair done at that new... My hair? The guy in the Mr. Softy truck bent down and held out a sundae cup. From it rose a white Alp with chocolate and strawberry sauce coursing down its sides. His beard's stubbly face was impassive. It said he'd seen it all before. Clay was sure he had, most of it twice. In the park, someone screamed. Clay looked over his shoulder again, telling himself that it had to be a scream of joy. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a sunny afternoon on the Boston Common, it pretty much had to be a scream of joy, right? The woman said something unintelligible to Maddie and flipped her cell phone closed with the practiced flip of the wrist. She dropped it back into her purse, then just stood there, as if she had forgotten what she was doing, or maybe even where she was. That's $4.50, said the Mr. Softy guy, still patiently holding out the ice cream sundae. Clay had time to think how fucking expensive everything was in the city. Perhaps the woman in the power suit thought so too. That, at least, was his first surmise. Because for a moment more she still did nothing, merely looked at the cup with its mound of ice cream and sliding sauce, as if she had never seen such a thing before. Then there came another cry from the common, not a human one this time, but something between a surprised yelp and a hurt yowl. Clay turned to look and saw the dog that had been trotting with the frisbee in its mouth. It was a good-sized brown dog, maybe a Labrador. He didn't really know dogs. When he needed to draw one, he got a book and copied a picture. A man in a business suit was down on his knees beside this one and had it in a necklock and appeared to be... Surely I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing, Clay thought, chewing on its ear. Then the dog howled again and tried to spurt away. The man in the business suit held it firm, and yes, there was the dog's ear in the man's mouth, and... As Clay continued to watch, the man tore it off the side of the dog's head. This time the dog uttered an almost human scream, and a number of ducks, which had been floating on a nearby pond, took flight, squawking. "Rast!" someone cried from behind Clay. It sounded like rast. It might have been rat or roast, but later experience made him lean toward rast. Not a word at all, but merely an inarticulate sound of aggression. He turned back toward the ice cream truck in time to see Power Suit Woman lunge through the serving window in an effort to grab Mr. Softy guy. She managed to snag the loose folds at the front of his white tunic, but his single, startled step backward was enough to break her hold. Her high heels briefly left the sidewalk, and he heard the rasp of cloth and the clink of buttons as the front of her jacket ran first up the little jut of the serving window's counter and then back down. The sundae tumbled from view. Clay saw a smear of ice cream and sauce on Power Suit Woman's left wrist and forearm as her high heels clacked back to the sidewalk. She staggered, knees bent. The closed-off, well-bred, out-in-public look on her face, what Clay thought of as your basic, on-the-street, no-face look, had been replaced by a convulsive snarl that shrank her eyes to slits and exposed both sets of teeth. Her upper lip had turned completely inside out, revealing a pink velvet lining as intimate as a vulva. Her poodle ran into the street, trailing its red leash with the hand loop in the end. A black limo came along and ran the poodle down before it got halfway across. Fluff at one moment, guts at the next. Poor damn thing was probably yapping in doggy heaven before it knew it was dead, Clay thought. He understood in some clinical way he was in shock, but that in no way changed the depth of his amazement. He stood there with his portfolio hanging from one hand and his round shopping bag hanging from the other and his mouth hanging open. Somewhere, it sounded like maybe around the corner on Newbury Street, something exploded. The two girls had exactly the same haircut above their iPod headphones, but the one with the peppermint-colored cell phone was blonde and her friend was brunette. They were Pixie Light and Pixie Dark. Now, Pixie Light dropped her phone on the sidewalk where it shattered and seized Power Suit Woman around the waist. Clay assumed, so far as he was capable of assuming anything in those moments, that she meant to restrain Power Suit Woman either from going after Mr. Softy Guy again or from running into the street after her dog. There was even a part of his mind that applauded the girl's presence of mind. Her friend Pixie Dark was backing away from the whole deal, small white hands clasped between her breasts, eyes wide. Clay dropped his own items, one on each side, and stepped forward to help Pixie light. On the other side of the street, he saw this only in his peripheral vision. A car swerved and bolted across the sidewalk in front of the Four Seasons, causing the doorman to dart out of the way. There were screams from the hotel's forecourt, and before Clay could begin helping Pixie Light with Power Suit Woman, Pixie Light had darted her pretty little face forward with snake-like speed, bared her undoubtedly strong young teeth, and battened on Power Suit Woman's neck. There was an enormous jet of blood. The Pixie Girl stuck her face in it, appeared to bathe in it, perhaps even drank from it. Clay was almost sure she did. Then shook Power Suit Woman back and forth like a doll. The woman was taller and had to outweigh the girl by at least 40 pounds, but the girl shook her hard enough to make the woman's head flop back and forth and send more blood flying. At the same time, the girl cocked her own blood-smeared face up to the bright blue October sky and howled in what sounded like triumph. She's mad, Clay thought, totally mad. Pixie Dark cried out, "Who are you? What's happening?" At the sound of her friend's voice, Pixie Light whipped her bloody head around. Blood dripped from the short dagger points of her hair, overhanging her forehead. Eyes like white lamps peered from blood-dappled sockets. Pixie Dark looked at Clay, her eyes wide. "Who are you?" she repeated, and then, "Who am I?" Pixie Light dropped Power Suit Woman, who collapsed to the sidewalk with her chewed-open carotid artery still spurting, then leaped at the girl with whom she had been chummily sharing a phone only a few minutes before. Clay didn't think. If he had thought, Pixie Dark might have had her throat open like the woman in the power suit. He didn't even look. He simply reached down to his right, seized the top of the small treasure shopping bag, and swung it at the back of Pixie Light's head as she leaped at her erstwhile friend, with her outstretched hands making clawfish against the blue sky. If he missed, he didn't miss or even hit the girl a glancing blow. The glass paperweight inside the bag struck the back of Pixie Light's head dead on, making a muffled thunk. Pixie Light dropped her hands, one blood-stained, one still clean, and fell to the sidewalk at her friend's feet like a sack of mail. "What the hell?" Mr. Softy Eye cried. His voice was improbably high. Maybe shock had given him that high tenor. "I don't know," Clay said. His heart was hammering. "Help me quick. This other one's bleeding to death." From behind them on Newberry Street came the unmistakable hollow bang and jingle of a car crash, followed by screams. The screams were followed by another explosion, this one louder, concussive, hammering the day. Behind the Mr. Softy truck, another car swerved across 3 lanes of Boylston Street and into the courtyard of the Four Seasons, mowing down a couple of pedestrians, and then plowing into the back of the previous car, which had finished with its nose crumpled into the revolving doors. This second crash shoved the first car farther into the revolving doors, bending them askew. Clay couldn't see if anyone was trapped in there. Clouds of steam were rising from the first car's breached radiator, but the agonized shrieks from the shadows suggested bad things, very bad. Mr. Softy Eye, blind on that side, was leaning out his serving window and staring at Clay. "What's going on over there?" "I don't know. Couple of car wrecks, people hurt. Never mind. Help me, man." He knelt beside Power Suit Woman in the blood and the shattered remnants of Pixie Light's pink cell phone. Power Suit Woman's twitches had now become weak indeed. "Smoke from over in Newberry," observed Mr. Softy Eye, still not emerging from the relative safety of his ice cream wagon. "Something blew up over there, I mean big time. Maybe it's terrorists." As soon as the word was out of his mouth, Clay was sure he was right. "Help me." "Who am I?" Pixie Dark suddenly screamed. Clay had forgotten all about her. He looked up in time to see the girl smack herself in the forehead with the heel of her hand, then turn around rapidly 3 times, standing almost on the toes of her tennies to do it. The sight called up a memory of some poem he'd read in a college-lit class. "Weave a circle round him thrice." Coleridge, wasn't it? She staggered, then ran rapidly down the sidewalk and directly into a lamp post. She made no attempt to avoid it or even put up her hands. She struck it face first, rebounded, staggered, then went at it again. "Stop that!" Clay roared. He shot to his feet, started to run toward her, slipped in Power Suit Woman's blood, almost fell, got going again, tripped on Pixie Light, and almost fell again. Pixie Dark looked around at him. Her nose was broken and gushing blood down her lower face. A vertical contusion was puffing up on her brow, rising like a thunderhead on a summer day. One of her eyes had gone crooked in its socket. She opened her mouth, exposing a ruin of what had probably been expensive orthodontic work, and laughed at him. He never forgot it. Then she ran away down the sidewalk, screaming. Behind him, a motor started up, and amplified bells began tinkling out the Sesame Street theme. Clay turned and saw the Mr. Softy truck pulling rapidly away from the curb, just as, from the top floor of the hotel across the way, a window shattered in a bright spray of glass. A body hurtled out into the October sky. It fell to the sidewalk, where it more or less exploded. More screams from the forecourt, screams of horror, screams of pain. "No!" Clay yelled, running alongside the Mr. Softy truck. "No, come back and help me! I need some help here, you son of a bitch!" No answer from Mr. Softy Guy, who maybe couldn't hear over his amplified music. Clay could remember the words from the days when he'd had no reason not to believe his marriage wouldn't last forever. In those days, Johnny watched Sesame Street every day, sitting in his little blue chair with his sippy cup clutched in his hands. Something about a sunny day keeping the clouds away. A man in a business suit came running out of the park, roaring wordless words at the top of his lungs, his coattails flapping behind him. Clay recognized him by his dog fur goatee. The man ran into Boylston Street. Cars swerved around him, barely missing him. He ran onto the other side, still roaring and waving his hands at the sky. He disappeared into the shadows beneath the canopy of the Four Seasons forecourt and was lost to view. But he must have gotten up to More Dickens immediately, because a fresh volley of screams broke out over there. Clay gave up his chase of the Mr. Softy truck and stood with one foot on the sidewalk and the other planted in the gutter, watching as it swerved into the center lane of Boylston Street, still tinkling. He was about to turn back to the unconscious girl and dying woman when another duckboat appeared, this one not loafing but roaring at top speed and yawing crazily from port to starboard. Some of the passengers were tumbling back and forth and howling, pleading for the driver to stop. Others simply clung to the metal struts running up the open sides of the ungainly thing as it made its way up Boylston Street against the flow of traffic. A man in a sweatshirt grabbed the driver from behind, and Clay heard another of those inarticulate cries through the duckboat's primitive amplification system as the driver threw the guy off with a mighty backward shrug. Not rasped this time, but something more guttural, something that sounded like glop. Then the duckboat driver saw the Mr. Softy truck. Clay was sure of it and changed course, aiming for it. "Oh, gosh, please no!" A woman sitting near the front of the tourist craft cried, and as it closed in on the tinkling ice cream truck, which was approximately 1/6 its size, Clay had a clear memory of watching the victory parade on TV the year the Red Sox won the World Series. The team rode in a slow-moving procession of these same duckboats, waving to the delirious multitudes as a cold autumn drizzle fell. "God, gosh, please no!" the woman shrieked again, and from beside Clay, a man said almost mildly, "Jesus Christ." The duckboat hit the ice cream truck broadside and flipped it like a child's toy. It landed on its side with its own amplification system, still tinkling out the Sesame Street theme music, and went skidding back toward the common, shooting up friction-generated bursts of sparks. Two women who had been watching dashed to get out of the way, holding hands, and just made it. The Mr. Softy truck bounced onto the sidewalk, went briefly airborne, then hit the wrought iron fence surrounding the park and came to rest. The music hiccuped twice, then stopped. The lunatic driving the duckboat had, meanwhile, lost whatever marginal control he might have had over his vehicle. It looped back across Boylston Street with its freight of terrified, screaming passengers clinging to the open sides, mounted the sidewalk across, and about 50 yards down from the point where the Mr. Softy truck had tinkled its last, and ran into the low brick retaining wall below the display window of a Tony furniture shop called City Lights. There was a vast, unmusical crash as the window shattered. The duck boat's wide rear end, Harbor Mistress, was written on it in pink script, rose perhaps 5 feet in the air. Momentum wanted the great waddling thing to go end over end. Mass would not allow. It settled back to the sidewalk with its snout poked among the scattered sofas and expensive living room chairs, but not before at least a dozen people had gone shooting forward, out of the duck boat and out of sight. Inside City Lights, a burglar alarm began to clang. Jesus Christ, said the mild voice from Clay's right elbow a second time. He turned that way and saw a short man with thinning dark hair, a tiny dark mustache and gold-rimmed spectacles. What's going on? I don't know, Clay said. Talking was hard, very. He found himself almost having to push words out. He supposed it was shock. Across the street, people were running away. Some from the Four Seasons, some from the crashed duck boat. As he watched, a duck boat runawayer collided with a Four Seasons escapee, and they both went crashing to the sidewalk. There was time to wonder if he'd gone insane and was hallucinating all this in a madhouse somewhere. Juniper Hill in Augusta, maybe, between Thorazine shots. The guy in the ice cream truck said maybe terrorists. I don't see any men with guns, said the short man with the mustache. No guys with bombs strapped to their backs either. Neither did Clay, but he did see his little small treasure shopping bag and his portfolio sitting on the sidewalk. And he saw that the blood from Power Suit Woman's open throat, he thought, all that blood had almost reached the portfolio. All but a dozen or so of his drawings for Dark Wanderer were in there, and it was the drawings his mind seized on. He started back that way at a speed walk, and the short man kept pace, when a second burglar alarm, some kind of alarm anyway, went off in the hotel, joining its hoarse bray to the clang of the City Lights alarm. The little guy jumped. It's the hotel, Clay said. I know, it's just that... Oh my gosh. He'd seen Power Suit Woman now lying in a lake of the magic stuff that had been running all her bells and whistles. 4 minutes ago? Only 2? She's dead. Clay told him, at least I'm pretty sure she is. That girl, he pointed at Pixie Light, she did it with her teeth. You're joking. I wish I was. From somewhere up Boylston Street, there was another explosion. Both men cringed. Clay realized he could now smell smoke. He picked up his small treasures bag and his portfolio and moved them both away from the spreading blood. These are mine, he said, wondering why he felt the need to explain. The little guy, who was wearing a tweed suit, quite dapper, Clay thought, was still staring, horrified, at the crumpled body of the woman who had stopped for a Sunday and lost first her dog and then her life. Behind them, 3 young men pelted past on the sidewalk, laughing and hurrahing. 2 had Red Sox caps turned around backward. One was carrying a carton clutched against his chest. It had the word Panasonic printed in blue on the side. This one stepped in Power Suit Woman's spreading blood with his right sneaker and left a fading 1-foot trail behind him as he and his mates ran on toward the east end of the Common and Chinatown beyond.